Welcome to Central Moments in our continued study through the book of Titus. As we come to the last part of chapter 1, I wonder if we have people in our lives that love us enough that they can tell us the truth. They have permission to tell us the truth. And they love us enough to be willing to tell us the truth, even though we may not want to hear the truth, but it's the best thing for us. Well, Paul in verse 10 of Titus 1 says, there are many rebellious people. And these were brand new churches that were being planted in Crete. They would have been people from a Jewish background as well as an idol-worshiping pagan background. And he said, you know what, they're just, people come from the culture, and in the culture they're taught to be rebellious and disrespectful and crazy. And he said, you're going to find they've shown up in some of the churches I've left you to strengthen Titus there on the island of Crete. So there are many rebellious people. They're full of meaningless talk and deception, especially those of the circumcision group. And these would be the Jewish people who would be inappropriately applying the ceremonial law of the Old Testament to New Testament believers. Not the moral law, like don't commit adultery and don't murder people and don't steal from them, but things like keeping holy days, eating kosher food, being circumcised especially. That's why he calls them the circumcision group. He said they're trying to impose legalisms from the Old Testament. They're misusing the Old Testament law, and they're just causing problems. They must be silenced because they are disrupting whole households. And of course, these would be, they had no church buildings in the first century. These would be house churches. So he said they're disrupting whole households by teaching things they ought not to teach. And that for the sake of what else is there but dishonest gain? I mean, follow the money. Some things haven't changed in 2,000 years or a lot more. He said they're out there for your money. They're causing problems in the church. They've carried that rebellious attitude of their culture into the church, and they're trying to manipulate you, and ultimately they're after your pocketbook. One of Crete's own prophets, verse 12, has said it. Cretians are always liars, evil brutes, and lazy gluttons. And Paul is probably quoting Epimenides, who was a religious leader in Crete several centuries before Christ lived, several centuries BC. And that's exactly how he characterized Cretan culture. And even in Paul's times, the people of Crete had this reputation of being kind of brutish, barbaric, immoral. And so Paul quotes what is commonly thought about Cretan culture. Cretans are always liars, they're evil brutes, and they're lazy gluttons. Not very flattering. And then Paul said, this saying is true. You're right, that's what they're like. And we've just finished planting a bunch of churches among them. Therefore, rebuke them sharply so that they will be sound in faith. We're introducing them to a new life in Jesus. But they're, of course, like many people do in America, they're importing the lifestyle and values of their culture, which makes them rebellious and hard to get along with. But they need to be sound in faith. So rebuke them sharply, so they'll be sound in faith and will not pay attention to Jewish myths or to the mere human commands of those who reject the truth. And then he says in verse 15, to the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted. They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. And here he's probably aiming at the Jewish, at the Jewish people, part of the congregations that have converted to Christianity but are still using the Old Testament in wrong ways. They had all this ritual purity. But just like Jesus said, it's not what you take into your body that makes you clean or unclean, it's what comes out of your heart. And so he said, if your heart's transformed, I mean, it doesn't matter what you eat or anything like that, it won't make you clean. To the pure, everything's pure. But if you're still corrupt in your heart, nothing's pure because you're corrupt and you're lost. And this is where Titus needs to thread the needle and say, there is a heart issue at the bottom of all this, and that's why Jesus has come to transform us. And it makes me say, God, let the right things be in my heart. Let me truly be forgiven, transformed by your Spirit. Lord Jesus, may this happen in my life. And thank God, to the pure, then all things become. We don't have to worry about all these regulations and rituals and rules other than living holy lives before God. May it be in our lives.